Troy the Planescape Guy with I Want to Be a GM. And today on Troy's Tips, we're going to talk a few minutes about languages and how many your character can know. And what does that mean, how many he can know? Well, if we look at first edition all the way to fifth edition, the number of languages that your character can know is based directly on your intelligence rating. Well, it makes sense. If you have a 13 intel versus an 18 intel, the guy with the 18 intel is going to know more. And he's going to be much better at math and other things. Anyway, I had a very interesting discussion the other day with a fellow DM who was going to be running Dragonlance, and he wanted to know if I thought that it was possible that some of the player characters would actually be able to know Draconian, the language of the dragons. I was like, you know what? That's a hell of a question. So I've done some research, and I came up short answer. They can, but. So there's always a but. So I'm going to go back a few years, and I'm going to tell you guys the same thing I told him. I said, here's a suggestion that I'm going to give you to help put this into your game. And remember, you're the DM. It's your game. You can do anything you want. It's a fantasy game. Rule number one, everybody at the table should have fun. So let's make this, as we're playing 5th edition now, let's just make this a skill check, like a history check or an basic intelligence check. So you hear somebody talking down the end of the hallway. You make out some of it. You do a skill check, you make it. That does not mean that you don't know enough about that language to read it, to write it, and carry on a conversation about anything. It just means that you've heard enough of it in the past that you recognize it. Okay? As an example, I know a couple phrases in German, enough to where I can order a beer at a tavern. Beyond that, I don't know anything, but I can recognize German if I hear it. Same thing with French. I can't speak any French. That's about the limit of it. But I would recognize French if I heard it. So that's the point that I'm trying to make here. Is it a skill check so you can recognize the language and not carry on a conversation? One of the other things you can consider doing as a DM with your game, when your players make up a new character and they get to this part where they're like, how do I figure out how many languages I know? Well, aren't you just a snot-nosed kid who's leaving the farm for the very first time, going to go see the world? How did you learn Elvish and Dwarf and Gnome and Goblin and Halfling? How did you learn that? Because the books, they say it takes as long as a year in constant study to learn that language. To learn it means I can read it, I can write it, and I can carry on a fluent conversation with it. So when you're making up that next character, leave one or two of those language slots open. And so your player, as you're into the game and doing some things, perhaps they're running into a lot of gnomes or a lot of halflings or a lot of orcs. Then they could take that language as one of them that they do know, because their own characters' experiences have played into the fact that they've learned it on the fly in the world as they're defending themselves or trying to solve the puzzles and things that you put towards them. So they would actually be learning that language. So can you learn Draconian? Well, first they would have to find a dragon to teach you. But that doesn't mean that you can't learn enough words or phrases to know it when you see it. When you hear it, I should say. Remember back in Harry Potter, when he was speaking to the basilisk, everybody was freaking out because they understood enough of it to recognize what it was. They had no clue what was being said, but they could recognize it. So that's all I'm saying is when your players are listening to the chatter at the end of a hall, trying to figure out if is that a good guy, is that a bad guy, let them do some kind of skill check. Figure it out on your own here. It could be against intelligence. It could be against the history. It could be against just about anything. And now they're recognizing the language. They don't have to know it to read and write it. Just recognize it. So that's my tip for the day. Add a little flavor to your languages known by your PCs. And talk to you later. This is Troy the Planescape Guy for I Want to Be a GM. Almost forgot to tell you, for more tips to help you move behind the screen, you can find us at iwannabeagm.com, Facebook, Twitch, Discord, and YouTube, or you can just watch our next video coming up now.